Okay, yeah. So again, let me just repeat so that this gets recorded. So basically, we are going to start a topic which is essentially to do with two very important things. One is that there is a system which is getting perturbed by an external force, and the system responds in a linear fashion. That is very important. Okay, and in that case there is a set of relationships which that system needs to obey, and those are basically called the Kramer's chronic relationships, and they do not apply only to optics. They are much more general than that. As I said, you have a system which is acted upon by an external force, and you have a response. Okay, so basically let me start sharing my screen. Yeah, so can you see my screen? I hope you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so these set of relationships, as I said, they are known as Kramer's chronic and all, but you have to understand the perspective of it all. That is very crucial before we jump into the details. There's a lot of mathematics here. Complicated, but it is indeed mathematics heavy. So this is a classic example where physics uses the language of math in order to establish physical principles and physical connections. So Aksha, general recap is that again, let me go back to this thing that the problem statement that we had right at the beginning of the course, and that is really down. My God, so many clicks. Yeah, this was where what we started out with. Basically, I asked this question: how can I trap a nanoparticle? Means a nanoparticle in some fluid medium, which can be air, which can be water, whatever. I start with the laser. That is like, or by light, nanoparticle using light, and that is through a laser beam which passes through a whole selection of optics, mirrors, and beam splitters. This is a beam splitter which is polarization dependent. This is a polarization rotator, is just called a half wave plate. These are some lenses which change the beam size of the laser, and indeed they can be used in certain types of lenses can be used to change beam shapes as well. We can talk about that at some point of time in the course. Then so they laser beam is directed into this very sort of large numerical aperture lens, which is called a microscope objective, focused into this small sample chamber, which contains the sort of a dispersion, a dilute dispersion of nanoparticles or microparticles, mesoscopic particles, and then it can be air as well. So I trap one of these and what it takes to do that. So as we are going on in this, the manner that we're going on is trying to investigate what are the processes that are involved. The beam percolates through, this whole medium there through this half wave plate. So half wave plate, as I said, change polarization. So how does light interact with the material here that will change polarization? That's something which we're going to look at. This is very important. These are a set of dichroic mirrors. Dichroic mirrors means they basically reflect some wavelength and they transmit another wavelength. That is crucial, which means that we are basically going to study how light reacts with matter, and that matter includes metals, that includes dielectrics, and that has reflection, that has transmission, that has absorption properties. In doing that, this we have gone to we have investigated dielectric materials, we have investigated metals, and then we are basically looking at, we're going into depths now. Okay, so we basically saw how a dielectric material, which has an interface with some other dielectric, that will sort of reflect, transmit, and initially we saw that. Then we went to metals. What is crucial is we now looked at, after that we looked at sort of light propagation or electromagnetic wave propagation inside these kind of materials, which also look at the material properties as a function of frequency of the light. And this is, and we sort of went to the microscopic theory of these, what causes the propagation, which is basically we thought of the electrons which compose these materials to be either bound electrons, which is the case for dielectrics, or which are free electrons, which are the case of metals. And we saw that the propagation of the wave, which is determined by the refractive index, the real part of the refractive index, and the imaginary part of the refractive index is also crucial, which is basically dealing with the absorption. And we saw that they both of them change drastically with the frequency of light. And indeed, the real part of the refractive index is it just goes through very drastic changes, and there is a completely different response. So indeed, the response of the material is manifested. This is what I want everybody to really soak in. The response is manifested through the refractive index. The refractive index, so the response has two parts. One, it allows the wave; other, it absorbs. Okay, so the absorption comes to the imaginary part, the propagation comes to the real part. And in this context, this is important. So as you see, this light, this D1, it will reflect this green light, but it transmits the red light, which is very important. Okay. And there will, for example, when we go to the nanoparticle, for example, if it's a metal, it is very crucial. One element that is very, very crucial is that when you really put in a lot of high intensity of light into the nanoparticle, it actually absorbs, it gets heated, and it actually can be very difficult to trap. Absorption is very crucial in those cases. So it is very much, what is important is to know what the absorption characteristics of these particles that I want to trap, what those characteristics are. It's very important to know. And it is indeed to know all this, all these important physical characteristics that we are just going, it's like, taking off, going into the core of an onion. We're peeling off outer shell after outer shell, trying to go into the core. Okay. So what we are trying to do now is to study a set of relations which actually govern how, and this may sound pretty strange, but it actually governs how the transmission or the propagation and the absorption are related. Is this clear what I'm trying to say? I'm saying that how transmission and absorption may be related, in the sense that, of course, you can say that trivially, you can say that if consider that reflectivity plus transmittivity plus absorptivity all equal to one, therefore I know both of them, I can subtract from one. That is a very macroscopic kind of an analysis. I'm trying to tell you, trying to go into the more microscopic origins. If I know character, and most importantly, from there, you will not be able to know how the system, you cannot predict how the system behaves for an entire range of frequencies. Okay, that is very, very important. So, so these are basically termed something, a very, very generic way that these are termed is essentially causality and dispersion relations. So can we have a little bit of preempting here, because we're going to dive into a lot of math. I don't want this to get lost. So why do you think this comes? Of course, this is simple because we are looking at sort of how the whole characteristics depend on frequency. Dispersion basically means frequency response. So where do you think causality comes in? Why is causality important? Why do you even talk of causality? Where is that featuring at all? Any thoughts about that? Where is causality coming in?
Sir, since we are like probably talking about very high speeds, then when that event took place might be important.
No, but Rohan, causality does not really mean when. What by the way, what is the meaning of causality? Let me pose
No, I mean
this.
the what was the effect and the cause? When was that?
No, but
That should be
can you
important.
tell me what causality, what you understand by causality?
So the response cannot precede the driving force.
Very good. Is that Anubhav or Chitradeep?
Sir Chitrodip.
Chitradeep, both of your voices are very similar. Anyway, yeah, exactly. So basically, a cause leads to an effect. That is very, very, very crucial. You cannot have the effect preceding the cause. And this is very crucial because whatever we are dealing with now basically is contingent on this assumption that I come with an electric field and the electrons respond, and the electrons cause a macroscopic behavior in the whole matter or material, which I hope you guys appreciate this, right? This is quite remarkable because see, when we are talking about how an object behaves, we're talking about big things, right? We're talking about a whole a glass slab which might be so like few inches big, I mean in the sense wide or and maybe even like tens of millimeters thick. I mean, we're talking about big macroscopic objects, and yet we are actually saying that the behavior at extremely macro scales can be directly related to how a single electron is responding. So that, I hope you realize, is pretty big a success. Because the way we are being able to develop this theory, remember, what I think, one thing you guys need to appreciate and understand being scientists, there is no, you know it is not that these theories existed, right? Nature does not care about these. We are trying to understand nature by developing some, what we say, testable hypotheses, which are, sort of which are basically just, the hypotheses, the edifice or the cementing factor for the different aspects in the hypothesis are nothing but strong mathematical logic, something which can be falsified, something which is quantitative. This is very important to understand. Newton's laws, I mean, Newton's laws are something which Newton created in order to understand why the apple fell from the tree. The laws themselves are our, sort of, it's part of our journey to understand how everything works. And they can be falsified. Very important. Everything has a regime of work. Newton's law does not work when you have velocities that are approaching the velocity of light. They do fail completely. So basically what we are trying to say is that anything that so when we say that we are looking at how a single electron responds, we are essentially trying to find out why this mirror will reflect, why this glass slab will transmit light. In order to understand, we have built this theory. Also, very importantly, we are able to do controlled experiments where we can verify that theory, and we can say, okay, this is the thing that when we titillate the system, when we actually create perturbations to the system, we can measure the system's response, and hey, this theory actually, whatever it predicts, we can verify. And that is where all these things, they lead to this. Okay, so we are, the greatness of this whole, this Drude model or this Lorentz model is that they are actually looking at how this equation of the motion of a single electron, and from that they are able to tell you how the entire macroscopic material works. Okay, this is very crucial. Anyway, so what I was coming to is causality is extremely important, because we assume that the event only happens because the cause is there. And there are many, many important things that sort of are a result of that, in the sense that, this is something which basically tells you also that, light, nothing can go before faster than the velocity of light. That, we in sort of space like, when we actually have this x minus ct greater than c, uh, that is something which, where no physical signals can actually go forward. Okay, so these, everything follows from, the light cone when it is like space like a time like. So that this causality of event coming because of the cause is actually a guiding principle to our understanding of nature at this moment. Okay, so now what I tried to say is that we have some kind of a phenomenon, and here again, the whole premise of all this is that we have this electron as a bound oscillator or free, whatever. It is a single oscillator which is being acted upon by a force, external force. The electron has a response, and it only responds after the force acts on it. And so basically, you just think of some, an electron bound to an atom, or free electron. It is acted upon by an external force, and it responds. And it responds in a linear fashion. Very important. Okay, very crucial. Okay, so now what we found out is that the response has an, if I look at the response, so typically this is your chi, this is the susceptibility. That has a real part, that has an imaginary part, right? This part and this part. This leads to one phenomena, this leads to a different phenomena. Both of them are leading to different phenomena. Can you say that these may be related? Can you ever kind of build a premise or even think why these can be related? This is one is real plane, this is the complex plane. This is imaginary, this is real. Can you even think of a strategy or some kind of a, situation where one can think of relating these? This is precisely what we are going to do, by the way. This is precisely what we are going to do.
So if the wave plates are such that if they are dependent on the intensity, then the phase acquired by the wave will be dependent on the intensity or the amplitude.
So why are you saying that the wave plate is a thing which is on the wave plate? Mana, you are saying the something which rotates the polarization, right? So where is the imaginary component coming? Sorry, this is chi zero. So I'm saying the real part component and the imaginary component. How can we relate these? What kind of, where have you seen some kind of, have you come across in your journey, in physics that you have had till now? Can you envisage a situation? Can you think of somewhere where real parts and imaginary parts somewhere are like connected? Can you think of anything? Can you think of anything? And don't limit yourself. See, expand your knowledge. See, the whole reason that we did the root thing, the last class, was basically to tell you that all roads lead to the same place. Okay, there are different routes which are taken, but finally there is one subject called physics. So have you encountered things where real parts, real things and imaginary things stand, together, or they are kind of very closely related. Anywhere, again, guys, don't restrain your thinking to optics. Please do not. I'll tell you, this thing we are going to study, it has immense importance in condensed matter, immense in magnetic susceptibility, conductivity, anything. Kramer's comics are very, very generalized things. I'm sure you will, I don't know if your condensed matter syllabus, I don't know, but it can be that you will study this in condensed matter as well, when you study magnetic susceptibility and all that. So where have you seen connections here? Real, imaginary, something which have to be related somewhere. And as I'm saying, don't limit yourself here. Anything, classical mechanics, quantum mechanics, anything. Nothing. Huh? Come on,
Sir,
guys.
in mathematics, I think we had encountered it in complex analysis like the Cauchy-Riemann conditions.
That is what we are going to use. That is what we are going to use. Don't go to math. Physics. Hey, please. Okay, I'll give you a hint. Quantum mechanics. Quantum
Sir, if
mechanics.
I remember correctly, I think in a wave function the the momentum is I think the imaginary part of d by d, I forgot exact formula, but it
Priyanuj, you think.
no
Priyanuj, this is basic quantum mechanics.
no
Please.
like that's the connection, like the imaginary part of that differentiation of a certain function
What
gives
are
you
these?
sorry.
X, Px. What is the operator for this?
Okay, okay.
Okay. But guys, don't use your imagination. X and Px. What this? What? I'll not write it. Tell me. Hey, please.
Minus IH cross del Lx.
Oh, aren't these related? Huh? Aren't
You
these
can write the
related?
commutator.
Yes. And now I will again sort of tell you to go more physical. Generally, when we talk about momentum, what space do we talk about? When we talk about momentum, what is the space we talk about? Huh?
K space.
Yes. Right. So then just think of this. Momentum typically, not typically, it is absolutely relates to K space. And how are X and K related? Huh? How are they related?
By Fourier transform.
Exactly. Priyanuj is the only guy who understands. Are all the कितने लोग हैं? कितने लोग? 25. 24. Okay, I am leaving out myself and I don't know if Bishojit is around. Okay, all 24. All 24. Is this clear? Please, if I hear, be honest. Are you following the discussion that we are having? You will not. This is not something that you will find in textbooks. This is my sort of, this is just my thoughts coming out. Huh? Is this part clear? Oh, damn. Clear. What the hell, man? Why is it not selecting? I think somebody sent a chat. Was it? No, some blink. Yes, sir.
Sir,
Okay.
sir, what is your point?
What
I
is
don't
my
get it.
point?
Yeah.
My point is that we are essentially relating the real and imaginary components of, so this is essentially a real sort of a whatever operator, a quantity. This is an imaginary quantity. We can actually relate them by a simple Fourier transform. This is my point. This is what we are going to basically see. And in optics, there are much more. So, x and px are also very important. One is the position, one is the momentum. They are actually related by Fourier transforms. They are actual physical variables, right? So in optics, what do you think will be equivalent to this? What do you think will be the equivalence of this? Are you getting my argument? I'm saying that, yeah. So there is a physical.
There is some problem is there because you can't say that X and P are the real and positive part, real and
I know.
imaginary part
Right. They
of
are
the same
two.
quantity.
Right. They are not. I
Yes.
am just in general saying there is a
Yes,
real
that is
quantity, there is an
yeah,
imaginary quantity.
and
Okay.
that is connected with the.
Yes.
That is fine.
Exactly. That is what I'm saying. We are going to get into in optics. So we are just sort of trying to lay down the the overview of this, the 20,000 feet view, as they say, 20,000 high, 20,000 feet high view, where you try to make connections.
Yes, you told that in that day.
So anyway, so I discussed with you, but not with the entire class. Anyway, so yeah, optics. Where do you think we can try to use these? And remember, when we talk about optics, we are actually going to talk about physical properties of a system, which will actually be connected thereby. So what do you think there can exist? These things. So as Vishwajit said, there is a difference in optics. We are going to say that we are going to actually use. Anyway, let me first know from you what is the equivalence that we can relate in this form. Huh? What? In optics that we have discussed till now? Real quantity, imaginary quantity? What can they be? Come on. Guys, what have
You mean real quantity of light itself, or of what?
in
Of the
optics,
theory?
whatever you have come across in light? No, I'm talking about physical characteristics, right? Physical characteristics means of materials, right? Physical characteristics of light, of course they are there, but light, okay, let me then say, okay, so the physical, anyway, so those are also part of optics, right? So where have you come across real and imaginary part, which are very crucially part of the entire physical characteristics of some object, of objects?
Real and imaginary parts of the refractive index.
Is that not clear to all of you? Is this not clear, guys? N and K. This is a real quantity. This is a complex quantity. Is this part so? Is this logic appearing very sort of fuzzy?
Sir, but refractive index has complex and imaginary parts. Both, right?
Exactly. So this is the real part. This is basically the one that is governing the transmission.
No, but how are they related?
That is the Kramer-Stomach. That is what we are going to study now. Okay, I am saying, of course, don't assume that I'm going to let you go like they say that, okay, they're related, abhi chalo, next chapter. No, I am just saying that just like you have encountered such kind of sort of scenarios where we have a real quantity and an imaginary quantity that are linked somehow by Fourier transforms. This thing is much more general, where you actually have something that is as sort of dissimilar in terms of the physical process.
No, I
They
mean to
are
say that,
also related. That is what we are going to study for the next maybe 5 classes.
I mean to say that without studying this, how do I come to the conclusion that these are related? That was
In the sense that no, no, Ron, you cannot come to the conclusion that they are related. I'm saying that you can, maybe you cannot conclude, but you can question. Are they related? That is what I'm saying. Can they be related? And of course, the answer is yes, they are related. But I'm saying that once we study all this and you realize that yes, this is done, they are absolutely and completely related, then you will possibly appreciate that this is part of a very general kind of a framework where you do see these kind of relationships in other situations also. And remember, these are actually, so basically these are essentially what are the Kramer's chronic relationships. These are what relate these two. And why are these so critical? Because transmission and absorption. So for example, so again, these are things that I'm telling you now, which you do not know, and we will discover these in the next whatever time it takes. So what I'm going to tell you is that, so why is this, to and for an experimentalist also, these are very critical. Because for example, so and remember, we are going to look at the whole range of frequencies. So for example, you know you experimenting at frequencies which are very high is actually difficult, in the sense that suppose I want to measure, let me say, okay, let me just start a new thing. Yeah, so importance of Kramer's chronic relationships. So basically, suppose you need to measure, say, something like absorptance at very large omega. Okay, so that means in, say, deep UV 200 nanometer, 150 nanometer, it is very, very difficult to get any sources at that kind of high frequency. The Kramer's chronic relationships actually allow you to get away from that. It is remarkable that you don't need to do that. It's fantastic. You don't need to measure that. Why? Because measuring the transmittance at at a large range of frequencies allows you to measure, to calculate, I should say, to determine is better, absorption characteristics. It is remarkable, right? You do an experiment to find out how, a sort of a dielectric slab or anything that you want to, that is of interest to you. You measure the transmittance characteristics for a large range. You just use Kramer's chronic. Basically, there are a set of Fourier transforms, and lo and behold, you know exactly how the absorption spectrum will look like. Isn't that cool? Right? Isn't that pretty cool that you don't need to? So you are completely mitigating, or like going past that requirement of needing a very, very high frequency sort of source in order to measure the absorption, by measuring at a different wavelength the transmission. and then using the Kramer-Stronach. This is really, and not just transmission, conductivity, susceptibility, whatever. You measure the real part, you know how the imaginary part will behave. So this is extremely empowering to an experimentalist. And of course, this is very, very, very deep mathematics. Okay, so I actually found a nice website which is, giving a good picture of the system. I'm going to forward that to you at the end of this class. So I will request you guys to go through it. But very importantly, it is a very different way of approach. It's somewhat simplistic, more simplistic. But I read through it actually, and I found it nice. I mean, it is easy to understand. We will go in a different way because typically in optics, so this is not really tailor-made towards understanding the interaction of light and matter, especially what we are going to deal with now. But it is still a sort of a good overview and a simple treatment of similar kind of things. Okay. So this is kind of, are there any questions on this? So I'm saying this is, again, I'm sort of being ambitious here. Again, I could have directly started with the math and gone through it, but I just want to prepare some fertile ground in you, so that you understand the perspective of what we are doing and why we are doing that. So do you have any questions, about this? I know I have stated some facts to you, but I'm telling you that why should refractive index, the real part and imaginary part, be related at all? It is not that it is coming out of the blue. You have seen these things happen in other branches of physics. So are you really appreciating what I'm saying, or is this completely sounding irrational or something? Can you just, I really want some feedback on this. What questions are coming to you?
Sir, my question is, even if we find X and PX like thing related in other branches of physics, why should we even suspect that something similar will happen with the refractive index?
No, but that Rohan, again, I said, because what I'm saying is, you know that your X and the PX or K, they are related. So I'm just saying, so of course we will see the story will flow. The story will flow. Okay, I'm just saying that, don't you think that when you see that, does this question not come in you? That because you know that X and K, K represents momentum, X represents position, they are sort of related. So for example, the pattern, the slit width, that determines the diffraction spectrum, right? So you need to change the diffraction spectrum, you change the slit width, right? So again, one is driving the other. And then they are actually real and imaginary. They are like linked by Fourier transforms, right? So the real and imaginary, that I have dared to, use quantum mechanics, where you know that X and Px are there, and X and Px are actually related by the uncertain relations, where still one, you can get the other, and sort of within some bounds and all that. That's a different, don't confuse that with this. That's a different regime altogether. But I'm still saying that, so for example, that's a very nice thing, that you actually think of diffraction. You can completely determine what is happening, what is going to happen on the screen by changing the slit width, slit dimensions. Similarly, you want to change the absorption of something at one frequency, you can temper that by changing the transmission at a different frequency. And I'm not saying that this will lead you to that. I'm saying that this is the power of the technique, and how one can lead to the other, that I'm trying to basically propose by saying that it is done in somewhere else. It is done somewhere. It's not that Kramer's, see, because I'll frankly tell you why I am going through all this. When I first sort of studied these relations, my question was, okay, there is a lot of nice stuff. The math flows well, but why am I doing this? Why? What was the necessity to go through all this sort of pretty impressive math, where we will use contour integrals and the Cauchy-Riemann and all that we'll use? Why am I doing this at all? And this is the justification that I have later on built. And the justification for me is Just as in quantum mechanics, you do have a way of relating x and px. Can you think of a way of relating the real and the imaginary part of refractive index? Does this make sense? And I'm not saying that they will be. I'm asking the question, can I?
Can I say something, sir?
Yeah, sure.
So, in generally, what happens that when we are perturbing a system with
Yes.
some external force or something, so
Hmm.
the system will respond,
Yes.
and the
Respond.
response will not be. The system will respond, and the response will not be in the same phase. So there will be a phase lag.
Yes.
So the response has to be a real part. That is
Yes.
the value of that,
Amplitude
and
of the
due to
response.
amplitude of that, and due to phase lag, there will be an imaginary part.
Yes.
But since the origin of the response is same, so the real part and imaginary part has to be connected.
Yes, that is also a good point. In fact, continuing with what Bishwajit is saying, that is very nice. So basically, if you think of this, guys, I think, yeah, so this is again a new thing that is coming to me while I'm talking, actually. So let me see if again this makes sense. This is again, so okay, I don't think we are going to progress too much today with the actual maths. So, guys, okay, let me just ask you, at this rate, we are going to have to struggle to finish whatever syllabus we have. So I will request some more classes or something later on, because this discussion was not planned. So will you be with me with that later on if you want some 4 5? I don't know. I hope we will not take that, but I don't want to rush. I don't want to rush. Will that be okay? Or else, see, this type of teaching we can even. I don't want to really end the course by teaching 60% of what I intended. So can I get that promise from you that if I need some 3 4 classes or whatever at the end, we can do some classes? Will that be fine?
Sir, what we can do is we have already assigned Friday 5 p.m. as tutorial,
Right. So
right?
those we can utilize. Great, fantastic. That's what I needed from you. Okay, great. Okay. Anyway, so see, because this is basically for, again, what Bishwajit said is an excellent thing, and we can actually try to illustrate that. So just think of this. Basically, what he's saying is that so essentially you have suppose yeah, this is kind of a this thing some kx equal to some f e to the I omega t kind of thing, and you have some x which is some e to the I phi something kind of a t sort of a response, right? So now if you think of this, the x basically is going to be something like this. If I think of a trial solution, right, it's going to be like this. Now very interestingly, so we take the amplitude, of course, is this, right, and the phase essentially is determined. So this is your, say, amplitude, and this is the time, right? So the phase is very interesting. Phase is something which is linked more on the x-axis, right? But now think of it, what is the physical manifestation of phase? The manifestation of phase is essentially to know what the amplitude is at a certain time. If you know the phase if you know phi t0, you actually know the amplitude at time t, right? Isn't that so? So that is why we use phase, that it is basically something for me to sort of understand how the wave will sort of behave after some time t, predict if I know how it is behaving at a certain time. But then phase again has its independent entity, which does not depend on the amplitude, but it can, the measure of that can tell you what the amplitude is, and the amplitude at that point of time tells you what the phase is. Is that clear? I mean, don't you agree with this? Do you agree with this? Huh?
Yes, sir.
So we have these 3 characters who only respond here. Sangeeta and all. There are so many of you who are you sleeping, or at least एक बार दो बार तो हाँ बोल सकती हो यार तुम लोग जो कुछ भी. But anyway, this is an argument which again will come across in textbooks. But basically what I'm trying to say is that, so you know that this is of course imaginary part of the solution, and this is a real part of the solution. So while they are not exactly, I mean, they are obviously different spaces, right? One is the real plane, one is the complex plane, right? So they cannot be, they are like independent. They are like, you know, pipes are sort of a different plane altogether. But then still one leads to the other. And this is exactly what the Kramer's chronic relations talk about. So this is again something which I feel is very important to gather, to gain as a physical perspective before we proceed. So Bishwajit, do you agree with this?
Yeah, but there is some problem is still there because
What problem?
uh, this is not the response you are
Now,
finding, right?
again, Bishwajit, again, I am again saying how
The
an
general case.
imaginary.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah. I got it. Yeah, but
yes.
actual that thing that
Actual case we are going to go in, of course,
yes,
and we are come
yes.
in now. The
That
actual,
I told that
yes, the
how
actual.
this is imaginary
Correct,
and why it
correct,
should be
correct,
connected.
correct. So all of them, as Bishwajit said, so both the real. Uh,
So pick up any response function and there will be
so
the
both the
real part
real,
and imaginary part
exactly,
that will be connected.
imaginary
So it has
part,
to be a response function.
right,
That is the
of
main.
a response function have the same origin. This is the critical part. Both of them are from that initial cause. Both of them come from that. And hence, again, they are related. But I'm generally saying, in order to understand how real components and imaginary components can be related to each other, I think a very good way of understanding is this, that phase and amplitude are actually completely linked to each other. They are inseparable. Okay. Acha. So once this is done, let me now formally commence the algorithm. I mean, the whole mathematical construct. So the first thing that we look at, so basically, you know, where again, I will set up something else also here, and that is the, so let us just say that you know, the velocity of light. So just consider. So basically, what we are going to do is look at the properties of signals in dispersive media. This is basically our target. And what is very important for you to note, very crucial, for example, is, so acha, so by the way, so group velocity, phase velocity, that concept is clear. So I'm going to write down an expression, and I don't know, maybe you guys should derive it or something. Are you familiar with this derivation for group velocity? Is this, are you aware? Huh? What?
Sir, I think we did something in second
You
year, but
did. So I have not derived it. So I will put this as an assignment. So I will just write down, please
we don't remember the
derive.
exact form.
Nah, wo karo. I will not. Hey, बहुत easy hai. Come on, Anirudh. It's very simple. Please derive. I
Sir,
will
this
not
is
know you.
Rohan.
Oh, Rohan. Huh? Rohan. Sorry. You pretended to be Anirudh to my ears. Anyway. So please derive this. Okay. Very simple. Just start from first principles, and so you can just start from the velocity, the definition of velocity. Then just assume that these are functions of omega, and omega is not constant. It changes. It is like n is a function of omega. You know, so different. So you know you can do it. So basically, how the origin of this is what? So Vp is omega by k, right? And what is Vg? Huh? What is Vg?
d omega dk.
Exactly. So you can just, from this you can easily get this. Just assume that this is, yeah, but all these are functions of x. This is a constant, but this is a function. So k you basically need to write as some, it is basically by this thing. This is for vacuum. So the moment you have refractive index for any material, this expression will change, right? So anyway, you derive this. This is not, I will not tell you how this works. Okay. Anyway, so this is telling you what? So this is actually giving very sort of strange things. That is, the takeaway from here is very clearly that if you have Vg greater than, you can have Vg greater than C, yeah, right, for large positive, sorry, negative dn d omega, right? Right? Very clear, right? Because if you have this large dn d omega, this will become problematic. This denominator can basically become less than 1. This becomes less than 1, money, this is gone. Okay. Now, obviously, the question comes, key, is that physically possible? And well, that is indeed physically possible. People have shown that this happens in systems as well. However, what I want to say is that there is a essential problem with this definition itself. Can somebody point out to me what that problem is? There is a basic definition which leads to this. Can somebody point out what the problem is in the way that I wrote this, which is basically leading from this? And again, mathematically, there's a big issue. What do you think is the issue?
We assume that the function is continuous and differentiable.
Absolutely. So very clearly, there is a problem. There is a pole in Vg, right? Because this can blow to 0. The moment you do that, that means d omega dk is not continuous or differentiable. This implies that d omega dk is no longer continuous or differentiable. And indeed, the presence of this pole is one of the main sort of foundations of this entire, this thing that we're going to talk about now. But so this is, so therefore generalizing and saying that velocity of light can go negative, group velocity can go negative because I have this definition, is a problem, because this is not really valid everywhere. You cannot really do this. You cannot do this operation everywhere for all possible scenarios and systems. And concluding this from, of course, I'm not saying that this is not possible. This is indeed, this has been shown as well. You can get many papers. I hope one group will present this in your term paper at some point. Okay. So basically, this is something which is not mathematically, one cannot really conclude that this is going to result in velocity of light, a group velocity of a signal that is greater than c. So this is the thing that we start from, and basically we are going to investigate some function similar to this in whatever we deal with now. Okay, so I will just maybe just a little bit I will do. So just look at some propagations of, just oh shucks, man, why is it not using? So basically, what I'm just going to start today is, as I said, so basically, what just think of this, that say you have some kind of some medium here, which is say some vacuum. Okay. this is your X. This is your interface. Okay, this is a vacuum, and this is some n of omega. And so X is greater than 0 here, and X is less than 0. And you have basically a signal which is propagating in this direction. This is like an interface. This is an interface. Okay. So now, say what I'm trying to say is that we consider, say, a signal which is propagating signal, say, signal or okay. Important, very crucial is from now on we are going to not consider a plane wave, just a single frequency wave. We are going to consider packets. We are going to consider mixed sort of. So, oh, by the way, so group velocity, phase, the concept is clear. I hope. So group velocity, phase velocity are different only when you have a wave packet. For a single wave, they are same, they are identical. So phase velocity is just how the phases evolve. Pulse train ka jo individual phases, how the phase changes at a function or a point, in the medium, how the sort of the phase of light that is traversing through that point, how that is changing with time. That is what it shows. Group velocity is essentially the velocity of the envelope. So the real signal always goes with the group velocity. So obviously we are going to work in the domain of a signal which has many frequencies, because otherwise this definition does not make any sense. Okay, so we consider a signal or a wave packet, like some ui of xt, which is coming from vacuum, and it is sort of going from like this. Okay, so penetrating.
Sir, we have a class.
Okay, oh shit, ठीक है छोड़ो. Oh, 6 बजे क्लास है तुम्हारा? आज क्लास था? स्पेशल क्लास?
It is a tutorial class extra.
Okay, ठीक है छोड़ो फिर. Okay, let us start again from the next class. So just let me perpendicularly, let me finish this on a semi infinite. So next week is going to be very critical, guys. So this is going to be one of the most interesting parts of the course. So I will request and as many people to participate. There are still already 18 people, 7 have left, but tell your people, tell friends to be there, because this Kramer's Chronic is a very, very important chapter and part of the course, and I request as many people possible to be there. Okay, so we will again take up the thing on Monday, and okay, great. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.